All right, guys, welcome in here. How's the audio? Let's do an audio check. Which beach? Beach is to be determined. Beach is no, it's somewhere in Virginia. All right, perfect, excellent. So today we had a little bit of a stormier. I mean, it's perfectly good outside right now, but it's windier right now. So we wanted to move in away from the porch, away from the cabana, and come on out down here. So we're inside the house right now. We won't have any issues with the wind or anything like that. So welcome in, guys. These have been pretty fun to do. Hopefully they're enjoyable for you guys. Hopefully you're going to be able to ask some questions and learn a little bit. You know, the season's fast approaching us. We got the week 3 preseason games starting tonight. There's certainly a number of storylines that we're going to watch for. Our guest today is Brad Evans of Yahoo.com. He does Yahoo Fantasy, and we're going to be able to talk to him a lot about some of the weekend's preseason games, and we're going to ask him some of the typical questions that we've been asking a lot of these guys who have been joining us with regard to some of the overrated and underrated players based on what they've seen so far in the preseason, because I think that's important. A lot of times for me as well, hopefully for you guys too, some of your opinions change. Your opinions modify a little bit from what you've seen, what you were thinking heading into the preseason to what you've seen thus far. And obviously coaches can play things to the vest a little bit. They can they don't have to, lay everything out there. So we're certainly going to see something slightly different when we start the season. But we're going to learn a lot in the preseason. And so we've seen 2 weeks in the books. We're going to learn even more from week 3 once those games start up. The 2 winners from the retweet who are going to get a link to the 2017 football preview are JB and Joshua Patrick. JB and Joshua Patrick. So I'm going to reach out to you. I'm going to reach out with a direct message containing a link to download the 2017 football preview. That is my publication. You can find it up at Amazon.com. You can find it on my website, sharpfootballanalysis.com. There's also a link to it on sharpfootballstats.com. Let's see. So we're going to continue that again today. If you retweet this, you get a link to the 2017. You'll be entered to win a link to the 2017 football preview in PDF form. So 2 winners. Just give this Periscope a retweet. You can do it now. You can do it later. Doesn't exactly matter when you do it, but I will be drawing it later today. And 2 of the people who have retweeted by then are going to get a link to the 2017 football preview in PDF format. With that said, let's see here. We've got, maybe Brad should be calling in momentarily. I'll go ahead and field any questions until Brad calls, though. If anybody's got any quick questions, feel free to fire away. Also, I will mention Deshaun Kaiser. I definitely like more than the alternatives. I think you got to see what he's got. I have no, I used to think back when I was younger that you need to get a quarterback and let him develop and that sort of thing. And that may be true if you have a lower round pick and you want to see what he can possibly do. But if you have a top pick and you've already built up your team a little bit, I like going with him. DJ or Bell? Personally, I like DJ. He's been training with the team all preseason. We know that the team, look, I think the receiving options kind of stink on the Cardinals right now, and I really think that DJ is going to possibly get his 1,000 yards rushing and receiving, and so I really like DJ. Now, that's not to say I don't like Le'Veon Bell, but I really like DJ. Arizona defense special seems to be number 1 for redraft. I think that there's a number of defenses that are close. I don't know that I think any one is heads and tails above the rest, but I think Arizona's defense, especially with the healthy Honey Badger, is going to be solid. The only thing about that you have to consider, I love the fact that the Seattle Seahawks offensive line is beat up a little bit, but the only thing I think that you have to consider is the simple fact that the Rams offense is going to be slightly better with a new coordinator, and I think the same is going to be true out in San Francisco with a new quarterback and a new coordinator, obviously head coach Shanahan. So they're not going to get as cupcake of a schedule as they had last year from those offenses, but yeah. I'm going to give out some win total bets later. I talked about the Giants winning the NFC East. I think the Eagles could be a nice sleeper with a chance. But the Giants, it's going to be tough because I do think the Cowboys and Giants are kind of neck and neck. But if I wanted to say where's the value, I would probably say it could be in Philadelphia if you're picking a division future for the NFC East. Yeah, the week-to-week fantasy defense, we kind of just talked about it. We were asking about somebody was asking about the Arizona Cardinals. It's hard. I think that there's a couple that are very close. Giants offense looks good on paper. Yeah, no problem, Ben. That's all right. Obviously, feel free to fire away whatever you got. The Giants offense looks good on paper, but even on paper, they still don't have a great run game, and their offensive line stinks. So they have some receivers, and they have a quarterback who's proven. But yeah, Philly, I like the fact that Philly got a new cornerback in there. And Tampa Bay could be really special this year. Could take a big step up defensively. All right, it looks like we might have Brad calling in here, so let's... Hello?
Yo, Martin, it's Brad.
Brad, how are you?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. So happy to have you on here to talk a little bit of the upcoming season. Let's see, guys. I just put him on the speakerphone. You guys let me know if you can hear Brad. But so Brad, a lot of developments going on for you. Let us know a little bit about some of the big announcement that you just had the other day.
Yeah, I got a ton of stuff going on. The Fantasy Football Hour, we just did a press release out yesterday. Just taped the first episode actually yesterday. It's airing right now in San Diego randomly, and it's going to air on various Fox Sports regional affiliates across the country, a total of 75 million households. It's a television pet project of mine. I've been trying to get off the ground for the last 6 years. Finally accomplished that task last year where it aired in the Denver metro area on Altitude TV, and we are fortunate enough to expand nationwide this season. So again, check it out, the Fantasy Football Hour on your local Fox Sports regional channel. Also launched a new podcast called The Fantasy Spin, produced by Podcast One, which you can download and subscribe to right now on iTunes or on the Podcast One website or through the Podcast One app. I do with my former colleague Brandon Funston. And it is also produced by Nate Lundy, who is my co-host on the Fantasy Football Hour. So a lot going on. I'm very excited for the upcoming season and all these various projects seeing the light of day.
Yeah, that is excellent. I mean, every new media opportunity that comes out there where we're getting better information than what currently exists. And that's why I'm excited about your show, because I know the type of caliber of information you try to put out there over at yahoo.com from the fantasy perspective. And, I'd rather see that and more intellectual discussion about football, incorporating analytics, incorporating intelligent game theory, as opposed to just a standard, hey, here's a new 3-person panel debate show where we're going to do some slapstick comedy and talk a little bit about every single sport that's out there. And I really feel like a lot of the viewers out there who are listening to this Periscope and are out in the audience right now have grown sick and tired of it. And I think that's why a lot of us don't even watch cable or these programs anymore, because there's more value in podcasts. And I've been a proponent of podcasts for a while now. As you know, preparing for your new podcast, it takes a lot of work to prepare good podcasts. And so getting that great football focused content, being able to get it on demand is such a benefit. And I think podcasts have really taken over. So I'm happy to see that some networks are becoming more intelligent about incorporating some more smarter analytics based, helpful decision-making process analysis back into TV as well.
Yeah, and if you look at television out there, the fantasy football landscape, our show, it's not gimmicky. It is going to be more argumentative. It's going to be more debate style. But to be honest with you, that kind of format plays perfectly to a fantasy audience, right? People don't want to hear a singular opinion. They would rather hear two sides of the story and then make up a decision in their own mind. So that's kind of the premise of our show on the Fantasy Football Hour. It's infotainment. It's info-rich. I present a ton of advanced analytics in my arguments and discussions on particular players, and we try to keep it fast-paced but lighthearted. So I could say on the first episode, we covered, I tallied it up, over 40 names in 1 hour. And there is not another show, a fantasy show on television, whether it's the NFL Network or ESPN or anywhere, that discusses that many names over that short of time. And that's what we want to try to do, is give quick, hard-hitting perspectives, because, fantasy players are voracious consumers of information, and they don't want to hear about 5 names, and they don't want those names being belabored. They're like, yeah, I may not own any shares of Todd Gurley, but I may own a share of LaShawn McCoy, so I'm going to stick around and wait, hopefully, for a perspective on him instead of one singular, elongated perspective on another guy.
Right, exactly. So remind the people, if they're just now tuning in, they could catch this on the Fox networks, but tell them again specifically, how frequently is the Fantasy Football Hour going to run? How often does that program air?
Well, it's actually going to air today over 30 times across the country on various Fox Sports regional networks. We are a weekly show, so it will air first in the Denver area in the market on Altitude TV on Wednesday evenings at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And then it gets distributed nationwide to the masses starting Thursday morning. But it airs at various times, depending upon your local Fox Sports regional, what they're running with local team programming. But it's out there, and I've already checked it. It ran on Masson in the Beltway area of D.C. and Baltimore this morning. It's going to air on MSG Plus in the New York City area later tonight, Fox Sports Midwest and various other markets as well later this evening. So definitely please check it out, the Fantasy Football Hour. I don't think you're going to be disappointed if you're a hardcore fantasy player.
So I think the best bet probably would be to check your local listings and just search on your DirecTV or whatever you use and search for the Fantasy Football Hour, and then you're going to be able to find it and just double-click the record button to record the series right then and there, and then it'll always be ready for you, and then you can kind of use to what time and what day it's going to air based on where you live, but it'll always be ready for you there in your DVR. Perfect. Well,
yeah, precisely.
Yeah, and if you guys aren't following Brad, he's on Twitter at Yahoo Noise. I'm on Twitter at Sharp Football. So let's go ahead and start breaking down some things. As we've done with a lot of the guests, I think it's very useful to get a new perspective, sort of a fresh perspective for the viewers as to, has anything changed so far in the preseason or based upon common conceptions right now as to overrated or underrated teams and players. So we're going to go ahead and start first with teams. Go ahead and share with us your most underrated team or two, and why those teams you feel are most underrated heading into this upcoming season.
Well, I don't know if they're necessarily underrated, from a common perspective, but a team that I think is one that could definitely exceed expectations. Tennessee Titans, for me. I was in Vegas back second week of July during the MLB All-Star break, and naturally I go and I love the futures bets, and I would slap Benji Franklin down on kind of a sleeper team that may be able to overachieve and make the Super Bowl. And the Tennessee Titans were 40-1 when I was out there to take the crown, and I thought that was extraordinary value because you look on paper, as you know, Warren, with a team that really checks a lot of boxes, especially offensively. You know, that with the better offensive lines in the NFL, probably going to be a top 5 unit this year. You got a couple of raging bulls there in the backfield, and DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry. You bring in Eric Decker and his handsomeness to the mix, and his sure-handed mitts as well inside the red zone to pair with Corey Davis, who they picked up at the NFL draft, who I'm very high on once he gets healthy. You know, if they're dealing with his bulky hamstring. Pair those guys with Delaney Walker and Rashard Matthews, who's a breakthrough, and then Marcus Mariota, who I think is going to just, you know, take a quantum leap in his development this year. I've got him ranked as my QB3 right now. That's how bullish I am on him. It goes Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, then Mariota. And the defense, I think, is going to be slightly above average. So pull it all together, and I really like that team a ton. I think they're undervalued. I also think Washington's undervalued. It's another team that I wagered on in Vegas to take the NFC crown at 25-1. I know they've looked a little bit discombobulated, befuddled here in the preseason, but this is a team that has all the tools to be very successful. You look at the team offensively, Kirk Cousins, where he struggled last season was in red zone efficiency. So what do? Well, you bring in one of the better red zone wide receivers in the game today, and Terrell Pryor, who's doing unprecedented work transitioning from quarterback to wide receiver. What he achieved last season, given that short time frame to transition to the new position, and the hydra of suck that he had at quarterback in Cleveland is remarkable. Then he got, of course, James Crowder there for now. Jordan Reed is healthy. I think the ground game will get going eventually because the offensive line, I think, is going to be a top 10 unit run blocking. So I really like this team a ton. I think, they've got a real good shot of not only winning the division, but being a top candidate to compete with the Green Bay Packers, Seattle Seahawks of the world in the NFC. Conversely, on the other side of the coin, a couple of teams I'm down on. Dallas, with or without Zeke. I'm not buying any stock into this franchise this year. I think the over-under on wins in Vegas is 10.5. I would hammer the living daylights on the under. I think this is a 9-17. I think, Dak Prescott, as impressive as he was last year, may regress somewhat, particularly from the fantasy perspective, because he's not going to rush for another 6 touchdowns this season. I worry about the murderer's row schedule that this team's going to face, particularly out of the gate. I think Des Bryant is going to see so many difficult matchups. 9 top DBs he's going to be lined up against this year. And if Elliott were to miss time, he's only going to see even more attention. As defenses tend to stack the defensive backfield and not the box. So that's a team I'm down on. And also the Oakland Raiders. I think Oakland is a team that's going to take a step back. I believe the over-under on wins is 10.5 on them. I think that's a team that's 9-7 as well in a highly competitive division. I'm not buying Derek Carr's stock, a guy with a 7.0 YPA in consecutive years, unsightly numbers in terms of deep ball completion percentage and red zone completion percentage. And you worry about Marshawn Lynch's longevity. We got to be real. He's a 31-year-old running back off a 1-year siesta, which he was riding bicycles through Scotland. Who knows what he's going to bring to the table for his hometown team. So not real big on that squad. I wouldn't be at all surprised, honestly, if the LA Chargers take the AFC West.
Yeah, I'm actually in agreement with a lot of your opinions there, so I think we're reading from the same sheet of music. I think one of the interesting things that people should be aware of with the Tennessee Titans, I have them pegged as playing the second easiest schedule of opposing offenses. And what that will mean is plenty of opportunity for the defense to look even better than what it was last season. And it doesn't hurt, by the way, that they play in the AFC South. And in the AFC South, we could be seeing Deshaun Watson or Tom Savage. We'll see. I think they should go with Watson. But in either case, that's a team without a quarterback right now. Maybe Deshaun gets there, but he certainly hasn't proven to us in the preseason that he is the franchise caliber quarterback right now. And of course, you've got Andrew Luck up in Indianapolis, who is not even playing right now, and his return is obviously questionable. They're saying he's throwing some finesse passes, but when will he actually get into action? And then what if he takes a couple of shots or two? How's the shoulder going to hold up? So there's a lot of question marks there. And of course, we got Bortles and Henne down in Jacksonville. So the division that they're playing in certainly is a benefit for them. And so I think, taking them to win that division at plus money is probably not a bad suggestion whatsoever. And I 100% agree with you with Dallas. I think that it's going to be difficult for them. I mean, as you know, as I know, Zeke was incredible as a rookie, but he wasn't just incredible. He was the most successful running back in the NFL last season behind a tremendous offensive line. You take him out of the mix for the first 7 weeks of the season if you're playing fantasy, you have a weaker offensive line in the package as well. I think it is going to be a recipe to struggle, and you're absolutely right. We can't ignore the cornerback matchups that Dallas is going to be facing this year. Tell me a little bit about Cole Beasley. I know it sounds like you're down on Dak, but down on Bryant. But what about Beasley? Do you think that I'm a little bit higher on Beasley than some other people out there? Do you agree or do you disagree?
No, I actually completely agree, especially if we're talking about a PPR league. I mean, he's gold, particularly in the later rounds. What are you paying for him? Like a 175, 180 ADP price? I mean, if people are grossly overlooking him. He's going to do a lot of that dirty work underneath, and especially with all the difficult matchups that Des Bryant's going to face. Who is Dak Prescott going to check down to? It's probably going to be to Jason Witten, maybe Rico Gathers if he, makes the squad out of camp. In a lot of two tight end sets, or it's going to be Cole Beasley operating out of the slot. And, we saw a catch rate last year, one of the more sure-handed receivers in the league at 76.5% in that category. I'm with you. I've been in several PPR leagues where, he's still out there sipping margaritas, in round 13, and I'm just like, this is asinine. Just going to get maybe 80, 85 receptions, and I think that's an outlandish projection. I mean, he caught 75 balls last year. May not do a ton of damage in terms of touchdowns, but if you got 80 catches, 900 yards, and say 5 TDs out of him, he's going to have a huge ROI, return on investment. So, 100% with you on Cole Beasley.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, I mean, if you look at that defense, they start out the season with 3 defensive linemen suspended. They lost a couple guys in the offseason from their secondary. They could be going through some growing pains. I see more negative game scripts in their future, which means more need to pass the football. And when there's more need to pass the football, sometimes when you're a quarterback like Dak, who had such a high efficiency rate last year and really kept the turnovers under control, you're going to be looking for those more safe passes. You're not going to be trying to force the ball as often, I think, into a guy like Bryant with strong coverage. You might be looking more towards the soft spots, which is a place that Cole Beasley really thrives. So I definitely think that I agree with you there. I think he's an interesting player. So you've laid out a good case for those 4 teams, 2 overrated, 2 underrated. Go ahead and talk to me about some players that you think right now are being underdrafted or overdrafted. And if you don't mind for a second, before we even get into that, tell me briefly, you have Marcus Mariota as number 3 quarterback overall. Who are the 2 ahead of him, and who are the 2 after him? What's your top 5 quarterbacks right now?
Yeah, so the 2 ahead of him are the usual suspects. It's Aaron Rodgers, number 1, Tom Brady, number 2, and then right behind Mariota is Drew Brees for me, and Russell Wilson at number 5. And I'm growing more and more enamored with Russell Wilson because of the problems on the offensive line. And you might say, well, that's counterintuitive. But because Russell Wilson is a magician in the open field as a runner, and a guy that is like a greased pig, he just slips out of heat and pressure in the pocket. Because that offensive line has so many issues, I think he is going to be flushed out of it. I think he's going to be forced to run, and he's such a great impromptu creator in those situations that I could see him getting maybe 550, 600 rushing yards this year if he can stay healthy. And a lot of people are going to point to the stats last year. Well, he was way down last year. Well, because he had a high ankle sprain early in the season, and it really sapped his ability to break, contain, and be an opportunistic runner. So, Russell Wilson to me, I've been trying to target a mini draft. A quarterback I think that is underrated right now it could be Deshaun Kaiser. I mean, Kaiser, barring a complete disaster in the dress rehearsal against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he is going to be a fascinating fantasy prospect to watch. And he's going to start week 1. We already hear all the whispers in the trees that Brock Osweiler, they're trying to deal him. They might as well outright cut him because he's complete garbage. Cody Kessler is, efficient as he was, particularly under pressure last year, not a huge deep ball thrower. So Kaiser's got a cannon for an arm. What I love about him is his scoring duality. A guy that can make plays with his legs, a guy that can make a play with his arm. And you're going to have some negative game scripts there in Cleveland as well. because of question marks on defense. So it's not unrealistic to think he could match what Cam Newton did last year. And I know it was a down year for Cam, but he was still QB 16 in terms of, fantasy points per game. So, could be 350 rushing yards with, 3 to 5 rushing touchdowns and, close to 20 passing TDs, with a, 15 and 17 INTs and maybe 3,800, 3,900 passing yards. I love guys that can score in variable ways, and Kaiser is certainly one of those guys you're essentially getting for free right now in a lot of fantasy drafts. Another undervalued guy that I like at the running back position, I know he plays on a lousy team, but I think Bilal Powell is going to make some serious noise this season, cleaning up in garbage time. He's going to come out smell like a rose in those situations. I mean, Jets are down 24-0 already in every single game imaginable. And with those negative game scripts and the fact that Matt Forte is 10 billion years old and, has been struggling with hamstring issues already, though he's back to practice, I could see Powell getting 65% of the opportunity share. And, with the deficits that the Jets are going to be faced with, he's just a superior receiver. He may catch 5-6 balls a game. And you're getting him right now around, in the middle 80s in ADP. You have to pay a little bit better price in a, PPR league, but a very interesting player from my perspective. And then one wide receiver that I'm bullish on, they can get a little bit later, in drafts. Cooper Kupp is interesting to me. I think he's a guy that could exceed 70 receptions this season with check down Charlie Jared Goff at quarterback. But another guy that I'm really heavily invested in right now that continues to climb up the ladder for me is Stephon Diggs, a player that you're essentially getting as a wide receiver 3 in terms of ADP basis that I think could toe the wide receiver top 20 line when it's all said and done. It's all about touchdowns with him, but the volume's going to be there with more sure-handed guys, 70-plus catch percentage last season. If he can get in that 5 to 7 touchdown range, which I think is very achievable, knowing that he's going to see a high volume, knowing that he's going to grab everything that's thrown his way, I absolutely love the value there. He's definitely going to have a nice return on it.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree with you. I'm big on the Minnesota Vikings offense in general. I think people underestimate exactly what this offense faced last season when you talk about the fact that they're planning to have Norv Turner as their coordinator, and they're planning to start Teddy Bridgewater. All of a sudden, Bridgewater goes down. They have to scramble to get Sam Bradford. He's coming from a totally different team, the Philadelphia Eagles, comes up to Minnesota, gets thrown into the fire, loses Adrian Peterson, loses Norv Turner as his offensive coordinator because it was so terrible. So then he has to deal with a new offensive coordinator coming into the mix. Oh, and by the way, he's playing quarterback behind the most beat up and injured offensive line in the NFL last season against the number 1 most strongest pass rushes going up against him. So it was like the worst possible scenario, and they still were able to, obviously, he set a record, Sam Bradford did, in terms of completion percentage last season, an NFL all-time record. I think this season, the opportunity abounds in terms of what he can do with a full off-season in this system, with a coordinator, hopefully for the entire year, with a stronger offensive line, with a much weaker schedule. There's just so many things in the Vikings' favor this year if you compare their offense to what they had to deal with last year.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I really do feel that is an underrated unit as a whole. I think that they got to put up the points. Really what it boils down to is the offensive line, right?
Absolutely.
For Minnesota. That line, transitioning from a power team to a zone team is going to be fascinating to see what unfolds. Very encouraging performance, though, preseason week 2 against the Seattle Seahawks in that first-string defense, which should be one of the better defensive lines in football. And I love Dalvin Cook's game. Warren, where you got Dalvin Cook in your pecking order? RB12, and I'm seriously debating putting him ahead of Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, I agree. We were talking about rookie running backs the other day, and I think his impact this season, even though I think Fournette is going to have the volume, I think that in terms of overall production, I will agree with you. I think that Dalvin Cook is going to be better because I think he's better than Latavius Murray. I think the team wants him in there. They brought Murray in there in case maybe he wasn't ready, but Dalvin Cook certainly has shown that he is ready. He's going to be able to carry that workload. And the one thing that I like about the way that this offense is right now is because Adrian Peterson's not there, there's no stress or pressure on the coordinator to feel like we need to feed this number one hog. And that might sound bad, like a negative thing, like, okay, well, they're not going to feed Dalvin Cook like they might have fed Adrian Peterson. But the reality is they're going to be setting them up for better success because they'll be less predictable. If you remember, under Norv Turner especially, this was on first down, we're going to run the ball with Adrian Peterson. And the defense knew all about that. They were able to stuff him. I think they're going to be a lot more balanced offensively, but it's going to give Dalvin Cook more opportunities to run into boxes that are a little bit lighter. And so I really like Dalvin Cook. And then when they get down into the red zone, obviously we know Kyle Rudolph was like a red zone target machine last season, but I think that's because they didn't have any type of run game whatsoever last year. With Matt Asiata, Jerick McKinnon, I think when they have Dalvin Cook in there, a lot of those targets that may have been going to Rudolph will actually be runs to Dalvin Cook. They'll be more balanced down in that area of the field. So absolutely, I am bigger on Dalvin Cook than I am on Leonard Fournette this upcoming season for sure.
And another guy that I'm growing increasingly interested in to see what unfolds. Let's stick with the rookie running back team real quick, if you don't mind, more. Is Christian McCaffrey. He was so electric in that last preseason game against the aforementioned Tennessee Titans. A guy just on a handful of touches just explodes on the screen. He glides as a runner. It's just so impressive in the open field. But the one knock against him that people just continue to get wrong is they're like, oh, he can't run between the tackles. He did plenty of that, Stanford. He had a 3.3 yards after contact per attempt with the Cardinals last year. He's not Danny Woodhead. I said this time and time again, he reminds me more of Reggie Bush from like his Miami days when he was a really productive between the tackles runner. I think he can get the job done. And then, initially I thought that McCaffrey was going to be maybe a 12, 13 touch per game guy. I'm curious to see how he's going to be deployed this weekend, but I'm growing increasingly convinced he could be maybe a 15 or 16 touch per game guy. They have to have his speed, explosiveness, game-breaking, playmaking ability on the field more often than not, because generally speaking, it's a pretty slow team on paper. Yeah,
and the other thing too about McCaffrey that I think some of the people are overlooking is, number one, the strength of schedule. We have right now. I have the Carolina Panthers facing the easiest schedule of opposing defenses this upcoming season. Now, they face an easy schedule of opposing pass defenses, but they also face an easy schedule of opposing run defenses. And when you're facing easy defenses, keep in mind that Carolina is typically a top 10 run-heavy team in one-score games. So, they will try to run the ball a little bit if the game's within one score. And then there's a lot of talk about what they're going to do with Cam Newton, how they're going to try to keep Cam Newton healthy. Will they try to throw the ball quickly to Christian McCaffrey? I think that they need to get the ball out of Cam's hands quickly, minimize the amount of time he's in the pocket. They can't give up those deep drops and explosive targets, but you have to be very balanced when you're doing that. But what I think will help them a lot is just a stronger running game and the ability in game script situations to be able to run the ball more. And with such an easy schedule of opposing defenses, they might be in that position. Now, they face some very good offenses this year. I actually have them facing I believe it's the number 5 schedule of opposing offenses this season. So it is going to be tough. They're going to have to keep scoring points, which is why I'm big on Carolina in general. I'm bigger on Cam than some people are. I'm a little bit bigger on Christian McCaffrey than some people are. I just hope that he's used efficiently by Shula. They do have to tinker and modify a little bit the way that they implement their offense and their running backs in the passing game, because they rarely use running backs in the passing game, but it's such an efficiency edge, and I think they really need to make an effort to get McCaffrey the ball more often in space. I think that's where he thrives, but you're absolutely right. I disagree with people who are thinking that he cannot run between the tackles. I think I echo your sentiments, tremendously. He did it at Stanford. He's going to be able to do it in the NFL as well.
I'm excited. I'm really excited to see him.
Yeah, and I just hope they use him as much as they should. It'd just be a shame if they didn't. And I think that they would get, coaches oftentimes get criticized when they go against public consensus, when they don't do things that the public likes, because otherwise all these coaches would be very efficient, because most of the time public consensus is what we've seen so far, and what we see thus far in the NFL is most people are not very efficient. And so teams are reluctant to do things that are different. Well, Christian McCaffrey is the guy that everybody wants to see. He's the guy that I think that they need to be able to use, and they'll get criticized a lot if they don't get him involved. And so hopefully for those reasons they will involve him a little bit more. Let's talk about real quick tonight's preseason game. And actually I'll just flow this question into the preseason games overall. Obviously we've got a couple games tonight. We've got Miami at Philadelphia, and we've got Carolina, who we were just talking about, at Jacksonville. And then we've got the rest of the Week 3 preseason games. Week 3 is obviously the biggest week of preseason out there. We get the best chance to see starters in action, taking those live snaps and getting those live reps. What are a couple of key things that you're looking to study in the preseason that hopefully will help you make smarter decisions as you move into your analysis starting Monday and Tuesday onward, whether it's drafts or whether it's season forecasts? What are you specifically looking for out of these games? What's your biggest focuses?
My biggest focus, obviously, is just player usage and how they're going to be deployed, because this is true dress rehearsal. There is some slight scheming that's actually going on, some game planning. Maybe there's 10 to 15 plays that are, scripted to start off the game, and I think that you can glean some insight into that and how guys are going to be used. I'm really curious, for example, in the Denver game, how the running back hierarchy is going to pan out. This is a franchise that has a ton of running backs on roster. We know from reports that Jamal Charles is going to be run early and often in the preseason matchup that the Broncos have, because they want to see if he can even make the team. And I am extremely reluctant to say that he will be on the final roster when it's all said and done. His knees could explode this weekend, and I'm really curious about seeing D'Angelo Henderson a little bit more. He has been so impressive in his first couple of preseason games. A guy that's a spitting image of Maurice Jones-Drew, who I feel may be better than C.J. Anderson right now in terms of what he brings to the table, because he's very versatile, much like C.J. is, but I think he's a little bit better receiver, more explosive in the open field, the guy that can get tough yards after initial contact. I mean, I understand he played at Coastal Carolina, put up stupid numbers at the subdivision level, but he's a guy that I think at a minimum is going to see 8 to 10 touches in the regular season opener against the L.A. Chargers. So, that's one situation that I'm definitely going to monitor extremely closely. In some other areas, I want to see Washington's offense try to get on the same page, because it looked just so out of sorts here the last, a couple of games that we've seen them so far. And some of these other murky backfields that are out there, like New England, is because Rex Burkhead continue to have a hot hand. And if he has another standout effort, it's entirely conceivable he is the big back and the primary running back, so it will be a rotational backfield week 1 for the New England Patriots as they match up with Kansas City. So, yeah, those are some of the storylines that I'm watching very closely, and I can't wait for, these franchises to tee it up and see what transpires in the process.
I absolutely agree. So let's talk about a couple of questions less specific about the players and games, but conceptually, what is one thing that bothers you the most about today's NFL? What's something when you're either watching the games or you hear other people talking about the games, what bothers you about the actual game of football right now? What would you do maybe to change something, or what do you just not like about it?
Well, honestly, the NFL games are too damn long. I don't like all the stoppages. If you were to sit down like on a Thursday night or a Monday night, and usually I watch Red Zone exclusively on Sundays because it's commercial-free and, it's nonstop action. You barely have time to get up and use the restroom because, you're going to miss an important play. I think it's pivotal. I think it's revolutionized how we consume the product. But if you watch a game from start to finish, it's kickoff, commercial, come back, one play, commercial. I think the number of timeouts needs to be minimized. They need to speed up the game somehow. 3.5, 4 hour contest when it's, you condense it down and it's like 40 minutes of actual gameplay, or it's actually less than that.
Yeah.
They need the NFL. Yeah, they got to do something to change that, because it's not a pleasurable experience in person, to be honest with you. I've stopped going to NFL games. I'd rather watch it on TV than, sit at a stadium and, see that kickoff and, anyway, another break. and just kind of wait around. It's almost like a cricket match.
Yeah.
So that's one thing in particular that I don't like. I think defenses are penalized too much. That is one aspect of the game that really gets under my skin. You know, the contact, it's such a different game than what it was even, in the 90s when, guys could actually touch each other down the field a little bit. Now I think that, the PIs are just thrown out way too much. That's something that needs to change. I think there needs to be a little bit more contact there. That's permissible, and I know it's a judgment call. Other than that, I am glad that the NFL has kind of loosened the no fun league policies, and guys are able to wear their own flashy cleats this year. They're able to do some dances this year. The NFL has always taken itself entirely too seriously, particularly in the Roger Goodell era, and I'm glad they're starting to understand that, hey, the fans understand this is an entertainment product. Let the players have some fun.
Yeah, they are going to do that, and I think it is going to be interesting to see the fans' reaction, and if they embrace the game a little bit better with them relaxing those policies. Moving on to analysts, some of your peers or some other people just in the industry who talk about games, who watch the games. Maybe they're the commenters, maybe they're guys who analyze the games afterwards, write them up on the internet, talk on Twitter. What's one thing that you think gets missed far too often by the community as a whole when they're analyzing the sport of football? Is there anything that you kind of have a island take, so to speak, where you disagree with the way that something is analyzed typically, or is there just a particular player or team or scheme that you think gets missed or gets wrong too often by most of the media?
Well, I think most of the media that covers the NFL, whether it's on Fox or ABC or CBS or ESPN, I mean, the guys in the booth, many of them very talented guys, and they call great games, but there's just few advanced analytics that are presented, right? The people that are consuming the product predominantly are fantasy football players and gamblers. I mean, that's just the stone cold truth. And, you don't have to flood a presentation with numbers, but it's certainly important to back it up. And we're seeing more of it now, like Chris Collinsworth, who is an investor in Pro Football Focus, is starting to incorporate more of that into the presentation and into the general vernacular, which is very encouraging, but it's been a very slow process and baby steps. So, I also think that there should be almost an advanced analytic critic who is in the booth at times that either can be brought on for a fantasy perspective. So if, a player were to get injured, let's say Rob Kelly suffered a major injury in week one, they can immediately cut away to a fantasy analyst who gives a 30-second spiel on why Samaje Perine is somebody that everybody should empty their fat bank accounts to acquire. That is serving their core audience. That is serving really the mainstream audience anymore, because there are 60 million fantasy players in the United States and Canada combined, and they just continue to miss the point. And it's because you have way too many old hat guys at high-level production positions at a lot of these networks who still feel that fantasy is Dungeons and Dragons and niche, when it in fact is the mainstream. That needs to change.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting idea. I think if you, and I'll build on that, but this might have been what you're describing anyways. They're already doing centralized NFL replay. If you had like a centralized fantasy football location for all of the Fox games, right, and then you also had like with that group, maybe in the next room over, a true analytics group, and you don't have to bring them on to every single broadcast. But when there are needs to bring them on to broadcast to discuss whether it's a player, whether it's a key decision, you could bring them on and pipe them in for 10 seconds. I know the game kind of moves quickly and there's a lot of different snaps, but it's not very difficult whether there's a break, a timeout, that they're not cutting away to commercials, or they're even between plays, to have the analyst come in and say, this would be their optimal play right now, as opposed to the guys who are trying to call the games in the booth there, just making up stuff on the go, who are already talking the entire game and miss out on a lot of the key things and I'm very critical of them, but I can imagine it's a very difficult job to do as well. And that's a fascinating idea to have maybe like a centralized group where you could cut away whether you wanted something on the play call or you wanted something on a player from a fantasy perspective, or how a particular injury could impact the team, and just have a centralized group in an office at some location who could be instantly, whether it's video added to the feed, added to the broadcast, a little box picture-in-picture, or you just throw their audio in there as they're talking with a couple guys calling the game. I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like Mike Perea, right? He is the NFL Rules Committee analyst. And whenever there is a questionable call, Fox will immediately cut away to Mike, and he provides beautiful insight. Wonderful insight. He is a tremendous asset to that broadcast. But why not do the same? I mean, hell, Jay Seeley is now offering stuff, like from a kicker's perspective. It blows my mind that these television executives are missing the boat on doing the same exact concept as Perea and also with Jay Beasley, but it's with a fantasy guy, right? I mean, that's all people care about. What we do when there is a breakout performance by a player in a game, people immediately go to Twitter and they offer their hot takes and they spin it forward. Why not just do it on the broadcast? Why not serve your core audience? And somebody's going to do it. I don't know who, if it's going to be CBS or Fox or ESPN, but it needs to be done. It's long overdue that there needs to be some sort of fantasy analyst perspective roped into live broadcast.
Yeah, and I 100% agree also that it should be specialists. I think that when you're analyzing football, right, there's a lot of guys, even from a sports betting perspective, who try to become experts on all different types of sports, and it's very difficult to do that. I think it would be in their negative interest to try to just educate the announcers on this type of thing. They need to have an expert who they can just cut away to talk about that, much like you mentioned the other couple of guys. And if you could bring in like a few different experts to talk about different elements, you've got your fantasy expert, you've got your play-by-play expert, you've got your injury expert, you've got your rules expert, your kicking expert. Yep. You incorporate these guys. I think that would make the broadcast tremendous, really be serving to the fans. 100% agree with you. We really appreciate this, Brad. Final question. We know you talk on Twitter at Yahoo Noise a lot about your tequila. You enjoy that. Frankly, sure. I do as well. I like aged rum. I like aged tequila. I have not been able to drink it all since May 31st with my voice issues. But once those get finalized, I'm going to be having some more to drink as soon as possible. But what is your favorite brand and style of tequila? What do you like the most?
Well, I don't really shun much of anything when it comes to the Mexican love juice, and it is hashtag Tequila Thursday after all. So I'm actually staring right now at a bottle in my studio of Herradura Ultra Añejo, and that is kind of my jam right now. It's a bottle that runs right around $60. It's not terribly expensive, but you have to splurge a little bit. It's worth it. It's aged 3 years in white oak American barrels, so it's clear. Unlike a lot of premium añejos, whether it's extra añejo or traditional añejo, which are usually brown and aged in regular oak barrels, with this being white oak, it turns clear. So a lot of people might mistake it for premium silver, and it really isn't. It is one of the smoothest, best-tasting tequilas. It's like a rose opening up in your mouth, like blossoming in your mouth when you consume this, and it goes down the palate. So I cannot recommend it anymore. It is just a fabulous tequila, and that's one of the misconceptions about tequila is people always harken back to their college days where they were drinking really cheap, nasty Jose Cuervo or his younger, cheaper, nastier cousin Pepe Lopez, and a lot of those low-end tequilas. If it doesn't say 100% agave on it, it's cut with high fructose corn syrup. So, you get that bite, and then the next day you get that hangover because it's just packed with sugar. When you have a high premium tequila, you're going to not have the bite. It's very smooth. It's going to go right down the throat perfectly. And the next day, unless you consume, a full bottle, you're going to be feeling okay.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. My wife has even bought me the two different types of special glasses that you drink it out of. I have no idea if that helps or not. There's some different glasses. So, but I'll tell you this. When I'm allowed to drink again, I'll probably start with a nice glass of red wine because I love that too. But once I switch over to something else, I'll give that your call a shot, and I'll let you know how I enjoyed it, because I definitely enjoy an extra añejo as well. So I'll look forward to that.
Yeah, please do. Get back in the saddle soon, Ward. We need you.
We will, and we really appreciate you joining us. Great luck with the show. Guys, remember, you can follow Brad on Twitter at Yahoo Noise, and definitely check out his show, The Fantasy Football Hour. Just search on your cable listings. It's going to be probably on Fox, one of the Fox Network channels, but check The Fantasy Football Hour. You can find out when it airs in your location and what day and what time it does, and just DVR that and get ready to enjoy some good analytical content and some new information. Thanks so much, Brad, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Warren. Good luck to you this evening.
All right, you too, buddy. All right, guys, that was Brad Evans from Yahoo. Really tremendous interview. Covered a lot of ground there. I think it's important to try to do that because the games, Week 3's games are getting ready to kick off here. So I really wanted to dive a little bit deeper into not just the over-underrated players, but what he was looking forward to watching in these preseason games, and get a little bit more insight into some other things. So is there any questions that you guys have? I'll only take maybe a couple minutes of questions. We are actually getting ready to eat some steamed crabs out there, and I'm going to move on to that. Push more passes. Well, I think more teams in general need to pass the ball more often to the tight end. The tight end is the most efficient pass that you can make across the board in the NFL. Like on average, the best success rate in the NFL is going to come to tight ends. And it's because of their matchups and where they're lined up on the field. And I think more teams need to focus on tight ends. And I think teams with bad offensive lines need to run more two tight end sets and release one of them into the pass patterns. I remember seeing Cincinnati last season, I forget, it was one of the primetime games, where they kept Tyler Eifert in to pass protect most every time, and they just kept targeting their wide receivers. Meanwhile, Tyler Eifert is probably their best mismatch, but you don't want to leave him in just because your line is having problems. Add a running back, like a fullback in there, add an extra tight end to block and pick up protection, and let these great tight ends go out in pass patterns, and they're just matchup nightmares, most of them. Exactly. Most are going to be covered by linebackers, sometimes safeties, but the size and speed basically nullifies any type of coverage you can get, especially with the modern era of the way that these tight ends are built and how they're coming into the NFL. There's no really great defensive schemes that eliminate strong pass receiving tight ends, and that's why we see guys like Rob Gronkowski. Anytime he's in the game, he can just dominate if they want to use him as such, if they don't just want to run behind him. So strongly love tight ends. Favorite sleeper tight end so far this upcoming season? I mean, if you want to talk a deep sleeper, I think Austin Hooper with Atlanta is tremendous. I don't think you're going to get better value than him this season if you're going to look at a sleeper tight end, but I also really like a lot of the guys higher up. One guy that I kind of am on an island about is Hunter Henry, but for me, I understand why some people are more down on him than they should be, or maybe they're more down on him than I am optimistic. That's specifically because Gates is still there. They're still paying Gates. Gates is still an icon in San Diego, but Hunter Henry is so much more efficient than Antonio Gates. Antonio Gates' career is almost over. He's like a little bit better than Jason Witten right now, but you could see the same similar style of fall off and decline in terms of their speed and their ability to separate. They're still just tremendous with catching the football, and they have big bodies, so they're still a value, but overall, from an efficiency perspective, Hunter Henry just dwarfs him. So Austin Hooper, Hunter Henry. I really love Kyle Rudolph. You're probably not going to find me drafting a tight end really high because I just think that there's so many great values at tight ends later. Ed Rivers absolutely does, and I do think it helps that Mike Williams is out for an extended period of time because Mike Williams has a similar tight end style body. I think he's like 6'4", 215, something like that. So he could have been almost like a de facto red zone target, tight end target. If Rivers loves throwing to the tight ends based on where they line up on the field, but also because of their body positioning and their size. And so I'm glad that Williams is not going to be in the mix. I think that's going to help Hunter Henry out a little bit more this season. But I'm waiting on tight ends because I think there's so many good ones, like in that 10 to 15, tight end 10 to 15 range. Ebron is this will be the last question, guys. Ebron's a real hot button guy for me because I really don't know what he's going to do exactly. He was rarely used in the red zone last season. I would love to see them throw the ball more to Ebron, but it's really difficult to waste a draft pick on a guy whose usage really has not been proven. His durability really has not been proven. I'm not exactly sure if they weren't throwing to him because it was purely Anquan Boldin, or if it was because he doesn't pass block very well. So he's mostly going out on routes. I just don't understand why they weren't targeting him hardly at all. It tells me that Stafford really wants to lock into a guy that he's comfortable using. And last season, he had a lot of success with Anquan Boldin. He's going to have less success this year, probably with anybody who he's throwing the football to. So then the question becomes, how much worse could this Lions offense be inside the red zone? And the other thing we can't forget is Theo Riddick. Catching balls out of the backfield, I think, is a big guy who they might start throwing the ball to a little bit more without Anquan Boldin there. So I won't assume that all the Boldin targets are just going to go 85% now to Ebron because Anquan Boldin's not there. I think that we're going to see them dispersed, and I also think that the running backs are going to get targeted as well. All right, guys, really appreciate you tuning in. Tomorrow's show is up in the air as of right now. I didn't bring a guest on because I wasn't exactly sure what we're going to do. So I'll see if I want to try to get a guest on, or we're just going to roll with a Q&A and a recap of the preseason thus far. But that is the last day of the Beach Week. Periscopes head away from the beach on Saturday. So I appreciate it, guys. Ravens tight end Joe Flacco is a problem. That offensive line is a slight problem, and I don't really know about Ben Watson, but he's going to get tons of opportunities there, especially now Danny Woodhead's injured. Will he be ready for week one? How long will he last? I do think the Ravens tight end could get some looks, and hopefully Watson could be healthy. Hey, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much. Red wine with most upside. I actually just like a regular table red. One of the wines that I was really enjoying is just called Prisoner, and that was really good. Just a red table wine. They don't have to be. People think of red table wines. They think that they're just these cheap wines that you might find at a restaurant. But I don't mind Cabernet, Merlot, those types, but just the red table wines I've really been enjoying a lot lately, and they sell those at reasonable prices. You don't have to get them super cheap, but it's not like they don't have nice $20, $30, $40, $50+ bottles of red table wine, and they're really delicious. So all right, guys, gonna get some food. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll catch you tomorrow.